I'm the utterly deranged, vicious male supporting role in this story. Not only did I drug the female lead, Willow, and get her pregnant, I even kidnapped her child to blackmail her. However, what the system never expected was that, even after all that, the love-obsessed female lead still couldn't forget me. So, in order to let the male lead, Makoto, successfully conquer her, the system faked my death. When I opened my eyes again, 6 years had already passed. I stood on the street, penniless. The male and female leads were already living happily ever after, while I had just escaped from a fire, so disheveled that I didn't even have shoes on. So, in confusion, I sent Willow a message. Can you lend me some money? The call came back quickly, but the one speaking wasn't Willow. After a brief silence, a little girl deliberately said in a cold tone, "Oh, another one pretending to be my dad." Chapter 1. But she still came. A kind passerby told her where I was. There was a brief pause in her breathing on the other end. Her voice was soft and gentle, and she hung up quickly. She said, all right, I'll be there soon." I returned the borrowed phone to the passerby and thanked them silently. When I was young, a fever ruined my throat. Since then, I haven't been able to speak. Not long after, a car stopped in front of me. A little girl hopped out, kicking her legs as she jumped down. When she saw my face, her eyes flickered. She kept a straight, cold expression and quietly looked me up and down for a while. Her gaze fell on my bare feet, dirty, messy, covered in soot, because I had just escaped from a fire. When I opened my eyes again, I had unexpectedly time-traveled to 6 years later. Scratching my head, I belatedly felt a bit embarrassed, but pretending not to care, I used sign language. "Sorry, could you lend me some money? I'll leave right away." 6 years had passed. The male and female leads were already living happily ever after. Even my daughter had started calling someone else dad. Halfway through signing, I suddenly remembered that Emma couldn't understand sign language. I borrowed a phone from the driver and was about to type. But Emma, looking a bit unhappy, pushed me into the car. It was rush hour. I thought she was upset because of the honking from the cars behind us. She turned her head to stare out the window, saying nothing. I had no choice but to hand her the phone to read. Emma tilted her head and asked, "How much do you need?" I typed, 1,000. Emma stared at the number for a while, then said uncertainly, 1 million. My vision went black for a second. Completely dumbfounded, I hurriedly waved my hands. Emma pressed her lips together, her childish voice full of innocence. "Is it not enough? I don't have that much money. When we get home, I'll ask Mom to give it to you." I tapped furiously on the phone screen, but she pushed the phone away when I held it out again, her small voice sounding a bit muffled. "I don't recognize a lot of words. I can't understand." How many words could a 6-year-old possibly know? Just now she recognized something as complicated as borrowing money. Yet now she couldn't even tell the difference between 1,000 and million. I gave up in frustration, lowering my head. I noticed that Emma had put her shoes on the wrong feet, and her socks didn't even match. Did she rush out that quickly? I rubbed my temples and pointed, trying to remind her, but she seemed to misunderstand. Tilting her head, she asked, "You want to hold my hand?" Pouting slightly, as if reluctant, she still stretched her hand toward me. She said, "Fine. I'll let you hold it for a little while." Chapter 2. Willow Lu was like this when she was little too. Back then, I stayed with the Lu family. At first, no one thought much of me, the mute kid. Willow had been kidnapped as a child, and both her parents died in that incident. Old Master Lu, worried about her safety and possible trauma, allowed her to choose a companion in a city, among a group of noisy children her age. Willow chose me, the quiet, dull one. Only later did I find out that she picked me because I was the most silent and unobtrusive. One stormy night, after I had been living in the Lu household for some time, the thunder woke me up. Then I heard a knock on the door. When I opened it, Willow stood there hugging her blanket, pouting as she said, "Are you afraid of thunder?" I was completely dumbfounded and was just about to shake my head. But she grabbed my arm and said, in an awkward tone, "Fine. I'll keep you company tonight." So Tsundere. Clearly, she was the one who was afraid of thunder. People who crave love often struggle to receive it. Just like me, I longed for parental affection as a child, yet never once received any special love. So Willow, who never truly belonged to me, was always destined to leave me. 6 years ago, before that fire happened, the male lead, Makoto, showed me the future between him and Willow. It turned out that I was the vicious male supporting role, someone who tried to seize the Lu family's fortune, tricked the female lead into sleeping with me, and betrayed her sincere feelings. In that future, I died in a fire. After my death, the male lead saved and healed the female lead. And years later, they lived happily ever after. After seeing it, I felt a little lost. So, in someone else's story, I was that terrible. Later, I really did get trapped in a fire. I only had time to pass my daughter through a narrow gap before the flames swallowed everything and trapped me inside, after choking on thick smoke. When I opened my eyes again, I was already here. 6 years later. I'm mute. I can't say kind words, nor harsh ones. I can't even win an argument. If I hadn't truly run out of options, with only Willow's phone number left in my mind, we probably would never have met again. But now, I regret it a little. I never planned to see Willow again. In my imagination, she would slap me and tell me to get lost. After all, in her eyes, this would count as me getting what I deserved. But things seemed to have gone off track. I suddenly felt extremely uneasy, like sitting on pins and needles. I wanted to say I didn't need the money anymore. I wanted to get out of the car. But Emma pushed the phone away, saying she couldn't understand. The driver remained focused on the road ahead, so all I could do was watch helplessly as the car drove into the Liu family's underground garage. Chapter 3. To my relief, Willow wasn't home. The driver explained that she had gone abroad that morning and wouldn't be back until next week. My phone had been accidentally smashed during the fire after transferring the SIM card into a new phone and turning it on. A flood of messages poured in all at once, so many that the screen lagged for a moment. I was startled. A notification from the carrier showed that a huge amount of credit had been added to my number. As for the missed calls and unread messages, most of them came from the same familiar number. Frowning, I tapped it open and scrolled down from the top. It read, "George, you sleep with me and then run away. If you don't come out soon, I'm going to get mad." Judging by the timing, this should have been during the months when I was captured by the Wong family and locked in an underground prison. Back then, my phone had been confiscated, and I had completely lost contact with everyone. I kept scrolling. Willow had written, "When I needed you the most, you weren't by my side. George, your mother took Emma away. Where are you? She said she'd trade Emma for shares of the Liu family." I agreed. "They all said you were dead." I didn't believe it. "I miss you. The child misses you too. What will it take for you to show up again? Someone pretended to be you today and scammed Emma out of 200. Idiot. If you don't show up soon, your daughter's going to get tricked away." The last message was from 2 years ago. She wrote, "If you see this, call me." After that, there was nothing. I thought, this must have been when the male lead successfully saved Willow, so she finally gave up on sending me messages. I lowered my head. My chest felt tight, almost suffocating. Yet I couldn't explain why. Actually, I had already seen it. While I was standing on the street waiting for Emma, I saw the advertisement on a giant screen at the mall. Back then, I looked up blankly as it played a promotional video of Makoto endorsing the Liu Corporation. I smiled bitterly. So it's true. No one is indispensable to anyone else. Now that they're happy, my appearance would only be a disturbance. I had been about to leave, but Emma just happened to appear in front of me, and by a strange twist of fate, I ended up getting into the car and coming back with her. I checked the balance in my account. I didn't know whether the Liu family simply didn't care about the little money I had, or if they thought I was too insignificant to bother with. Even after my death 6 years ago, they hadn't even closed my account, holding onto the reassuring balance. I planned to transfer the money for the phone and clothes to a servant, and ask them to pass it along. Then I would leave. Since everyone was already happy, there was no need for me to disturb them anymore. Just as I pushed the door open, Emma, who was standing outside, instinctively took a step back. Startled by me, she lifted her chin slightly and asked in a deliberately casual tone, "Where are you going?" While I was in the room earlier, I had already downloaded a translator. I typed on it and played the voice aloud. "Thank you, I'm leaving." Time is a strange thing. Just a few hours ago, she was still a crying baby. And now she could already run and jump. Her eyes widened slightly, then suddenly turned red. She grabbed my hand nervously, panicking as she shouted, "No, you still owe me money, you can't leave." All her earlier cold pretense was gone. I crouched down to meet her eyes, very gently, very carefully. I stroked her soft hair. I had seen that future. In that future, everyone was happy. Emma would have a good father. She would grow up safe and joyful. There would be no calculating grandfather, and no irresponsible, heartless father like me. I pressed the play button, and a calm, mechanical voice echoed through the hallway. "I'll transfer the money for the phone to you." Emma glared at me, stubbornly clutching my hand and refusing to let go. She cried so hard she could barely catch her breath, shaking her head as she said, "That's not it. You messaged me and asked me to transfer you 200. That day after school, I secretly ran out and waited for you on the bridge for a long time. You lied to me. You didn't come." Her somewhat jumbled words reminded me of what Willow had mentioned in her messages. Someone had impersonated me and scammed Emma out of 200. My eyes stung a little. I reached out and wiped the tears from Emma's soft cheeks. If Makoto came back and saw this, it wouldn't be good. To Emma, Makoto wasn't just a father, he was also her future support. There mustn't be any rift because of me. I didn't want him to look at Emma with nothing but annoyance and discomfort in the future because of my existence. I wanted to leave before Makoto returned. Just as I turned around, Emma suddenly lunged forward and hugged one of my legs. I swallowed the bitterness in my chest and looked down helplessly at her as she clung to me, refusing to let go. Then, a faint rustling sound came from ahead. Sensing something, I lifted my head and met a pair of dark eyes. At the end of the long corridor, someone stood there, travel-worn. Her coat was soaked by the heavy rain, and her voice was hoarse. Willow's voice trembled as she said, "George, how could you bully a child like this?" Chapter 4. I don't know when the rain outside started falling, but in a bit of panic, I pried Emma's hands off me, then quickly looked past Willow, checking behind her. When I didn't see anyone else, I finally let out a sigh of relief. Emma clung to me again, hugging my leg as she shouted at Willow, "Mom, hurry and give Dad 1 million. If you give it to him, he won't leave." I was completely confused. Meeting Willow's slightly furrowed brows, I quickly raised my hands and signed in defense. "No, I originally just wanted to borrow 1,000. Emma doesn't understand sign language, and she can't read well. She got it wrong." My hands moved rapidly, afraid she might misunderstand. Willow clearly understood. She pressed her lips together, but still couldn't help letting out a soft laugh. With an ambiguous tone, she said, "Emma doesn't understand sign language." I noticed the small hand gripping my pant leg suddenly tighten, but Willow quickly brushed the topic aside and told Emma to stop making a fuss and go back to her room. Emma glared at her angrily. "Why should I? I was the one who brought Dad back. And Dad texted and called me. He came back because of me." Even while arguing, she didn't forget to show off. Willow lowered her eyes and looked at her for a moment, then rolled her eyes and said, "If you hadn't secretly swapped my SIM card again, would it even have been your turn to pick him up?" She tried to pull Emma away but couldn't. Willow let out a cold snort and said, "Fine then. Ask your dad yourself if he wants you to go back to your room." The next second, both of their gazes landed on me at the same time. My scalp tingled. I instinctively looked away. After a brief hesitation, I signed, "Maybe I should just leave." Willow turned her head and, with a completely straight face, made something up to Emma. "See, he says it's late now, and you should go back to your room and sleep." Emma puffed up in anger. "You're lying, obviously." Willow bent down, raised a finger, and gently shook it to interrupt her. "If you can't understand sign language, then don't make wild guesses." Hearing this, Emma fell silent instantly. She pouted, looking at me with grievance in her eyes, but in the end, she didn't say anything. As if noticing her reluctance, Willow leaned closer to me and whispered, "That little girl won't give up easily. Wait here for me, okay?" Then she pulled Emma away, crouched down in front of her, and seemed to say something softly. Emma immediately quieted down. She hesitated, secretly glanced at me, and then obediently let Willow lead her away. The surroundings fell silent. Coming back to my senses, I heard the sound of rain from the half-open floor-to-ceiling window in the study. The wind was strong, blowing the sheer curtains outward, and even the papers on the desk fluttered noisily. Worried that the rain might mess up and soak the documents, I walked over and closed the window. But as I turned around, I accidentally knocked a book off the shelf. From inside the title page, a worn 10-yuan bill with a torn corner slipped out. Chapter 5. When I saw that familiar 10-yuan bill, I froze. It felt as if I had been pulled back into that summer once again. Back then, Willow was no longer as cold toward me as she had been when we first met. At some point, without me knowing, she had learned sign language behind my back. I could still clearly remember the first time she awkwardly gestured to me in sign language, telling me she understood. Her expression was still distant and aloof, yet she stubbornly said, "It wastes too much of my time to wait for you to write everything down for me." I looked into her eyes, just about to thank her, but the door was suddenly pushed open. Someone said, "Willow walks around with that cold face all day. Who is she trying to put on an act for? Ain't nobody with no parents, if she weren't the Liu family's heiress. Do you think I'd bother sucking up to her? When old man Liu dies, let's see who's still there to protect her." Willow's expression remained indifferent, but the moment she heard old man Liu, her face turned cold, her lips pressed into a tight line. The person didn't seem to notice Willow, Liu and me at all. Hidden in the corner behind stacks of boxes, I recognized that voice. It was Martin, the youngest son of the Han family. Today was Grandpa Liu's birthday banquet. Earlier, Martin had tried to strike up a conversation with Willow and asked for her WeChat. Willow had simply replied coldly that she didn't use WeChat. When he left, his expression had been terrible. This was why. But honestly, Willow really didn't use WeChat, and she was always sparing with her words toward everyone, so she wasn't targeting him specifically. She treated everyone the same, cold and distant across the board. Everyone knew that ever since her childhood kidnapping, Willow had always been quiet and expressionless. People were long used to it, but in his eyes, it became her putting on airs. After insulting Willow, he turned to insult me as well. That useless mute from the Wong family too, always trailing behind Willow like a simp. Does he seriously think he can latch onto the Liu family? Completely worthless as the main account, no wonder his dad's already training a backup. Pathetic. An abandoned kid no one wants, not even as good as an illegitimate child. I felt Willow lift her gaze, her eyes resting on my face for a brief moment. I turned my head slightly, inexplicably tense, my jaw clenched. The people around Martin calmed him down for a bit and began offering him ideas, like splashing wine on Willow later, or mixing mustard into my drink to make me embarrass myself in public, things like that. After Martin finally vented his anger and left, Willow slowly stepped out from the shadows in the corner. Then she turned and walked into the kitchen. She rummaged around, looking dissatisfied. For some reason, I just knew she was looking for mustard. I stepped past her and found a handful of chili peppers in a corner of the prep area. Then I gestured to her. There's no mustard. These peppers are very spicy. Chili water, would that work? Willow's eyes lit up instantly. She reached out, took the peppers, and lightly said, She called over 2 attendants, whispered a few instructions, then pulled me along to the second floor railing. That was probably the liveliest moment of the night. While toasting with his elders, Martin suddenly spat everything out with a puff, even knocking over the champagne tower beside him and drenching himself in alcohol. The elders of the Martin family lost face, apologizing profusely while scolding him harshly in public. At the peak of his humiliation, Martin seemed to sense something and looked up, finally spotting us watching from the second floor railing. Willow tilted her head slightly, raised an eyebrow, and casually shook the chili peppers in her hand. Mouthing each word slowly, she said, "This is what doing whatever you want really looks like." Naturally, such petty squabbles among the younger generation couldn't escape Grandpa Liu's notice. Willow could afford to be willful, but I couldn't. Chapter 6. Perhaps having received instructions from Grandpa Liu, my father, who had always disliked me, unexpectedly told me to go back to the Wong family with him today. Seeing that the birthday banquet was about to end, I hesitated for a moment before apologizing to Willow. "Sorry. I might not be able to come keep you company anymore." My father's expression had looked terrible just now. I figured Grandpa Liu had probably sent me back home. Willow clearly understood all the hidden implications behind it. She put her hands on her hips and said like a little adult, "If you don't want to go back, then don't. No one here can make you leave." Seeing that I was still dejected, she pulled me into the surveillance room and showed me the footage from the kitchen and the hallway. That was when I realized that the parts of the surveillance recording where we had secretly done something mischievous earlier had already been replaced. She copied the footage of Martin cursing and plotting onto a USB drive and handed it to me, saying, "If he ever messes with you again, just throw this in his face." Her eyes shifted slightly as she thought of something. Then she added, "Stay with me until 10 later. Believe it or not, even if the Wong family's car leaves, no one will dare come and drive you away tonight." Willow stayed with me on the rooftop, feeding mosquitoes until 10. I watched as the Wong family's car really did leave. Before my father left, there was even a hint of approval in the way he looked at me. I felt deeply grateful to Willow. It felt like something between us had changed. Even if helping me had only been a casual act for her, she still stayed with me on the rooftop, feeding mosquitoes together. That was something only friends would do. So I gestured with my hands and couldn't help asking, "Are we friends now?" She replied, "No." So it was really that hard to become Willow's friend. I felt a little regretful, but not too upset. After all, Willow had always been cold and difficult to please. If it didn't work this time, I would just try harder next time. But the next moment, I heard Willow blink and say, "It's a closer, unbreakable accomplice relationship." My eyes widened slightly as I stared at her blankly. Somehow, I felt that the kind of relationship she was talking about sounded even more important than ordinary friendships. Suddenly, she asked, "Do you have any money on you?" I rummaged around for a long time and finally found only a crumpled 10-yuan bill with a torn corner. Willow briskly snatched it from my hand. Her shadow, cast by the moonlight, leaned toward me. She curved her brows slightly and said, "Then now, I owe you 10 yuans. You're my creditor. So no matter what trouble you run into in the future, you can come collect the debt from me. Don't you dare feel embarrassed. Got it?" Seeing that I was distracted, Willow grabbed my ear in annoyance and repeated herself, "Did you remember that?" I nodded hurriedly and promised her, "Don't worry, I'll never forget this for the rest of my life." Later, perhaps because she had given me similar reminders a few more times like tonight, when I ran into trouble again, I didn't have to pretend to be strong or endure everything alone. Instead, I would take the initiative to confide in her. So much so that when I was trapped in a raging fire, and the moment I opened my eyes again only to find that I had time-traveled 6 years into the future, Standing on a bustling street, looking at a world that had become unfamiliar, my mind went blank, and all that remained inside me was fear. Even so, I didn't think of anyone else, not my parents, nor my friends. Instead, I instinctively borrowed a phone from a passerby. Then I sent Willow a message. "I'm George." Immediately after, I pressed send on the second sentence without hesitation. "Can you lend me some money?" Chapter 7. I picked up the 10-yuan bill that had fallen out of the book. The creases on it had long been flattened by the pages, leaving only the same missing corner as before. I never expected that Willow would still keep it. At that moment, the study door behind me was pushed open. I turned around and saw Willow. It hadn't even been 2 minutes since she had taken Emma back to her room. Her gaze fell on the 10-yuan bill in my hand, and she asked, "So, are you here to collect your debt from me now?" I didn't follow her lead. Instead, I asked, "Is my household registration still active?" Willow said, "Yes." "Back then, your father wanted to cancel it, but I stopped him and had it changed to missing instead." I let out a sigh of relief. That was good. At least I wasn't undocumented now. I could still find a job. Otherwise, no matter how much savings I had, it would eventually run out. So I solemnly raised the 10-yuan bill and gestured, "I want to collect the debt." Willow stared at me without blinking, waiting for me to make my request. I gestured, "Give me an umbrella." The rain outside was heavy. With that same 10 yuans from back then, I chose to exchange it for an umbrella. She asked, "That's all you want?" I nodded. That was all. I carefully folded the 10-yuan bill, intending to put it back into my pocket. This should be the last time I would ever use this bill. I remembered how I felt back then. Standing beneath the giant screen and looking up at that advertisement, it was like gazing at a beautiful dream that could never be reached. If everyone could be happy, that would be nice. From now on, there would be no more malicious male-supporting characters coming to disturb anything. Taking back this old bill meant that Willow and I would be even from now on. But before I could react, Willow quickly snatched the 10-yuan bill from my hand and tucked it back into the book. I froze. I gestured, "Why are you taking my money?" Willow lifted her eyelids slightly to glance at me, speaking as if it were perfectly natural. "I owe you money. You asked me to repay you with an umbrella. So this 10 yuans is mine now." "George, wouldn't it be a bit greedy if you took both?" That actually made sense. But if that was the case, then the final say over how the 10-yuan debt was settled would always remain in Willow's hands, which meant we would never truly be untangled from each other. I had been led right into her logic. Frowning, I gestured, "Then just return the money to me. I don't want the umbrella anymore." I reached out to grab it back, but Willow suddenly let out a soft cry. "You're hurting me." I instinctively loosened my grip. She immediately curved her eyes into a smile and mischievously hid the book behind her back. Our eyes met. She looked at me and said, "Then let's say I'm borrowing another 10 from you." Seeing that I was about to gesture again, she pushed my hands aside and said, "Stop dragging this out. Just tell me, what do you want?" She added, "Anything is fine, even me." She leaned closer, her tone alluring and almost hypnotic. I understood what she was implying. I pushed her away in one motion, quite annoyed by her unreasonable behavior. 6 years had passed. Willow seemed to have changed. She used to be willful, but never this frivolous. Instead of enjoying a good life with the male lead, she had somehow developed such improper thoughts. I shot her a reproachful glance and refused without hesitation. "No." Willow paused at that, her expression unreadable, though there was a trace of grievance in her voice as she said, "All right." She was actually feeling wronged. Chapter 8. I felt both helpless and a little saddened, thinking that Willow, 6 years later, had turned out like this. Not only had she gone astray, she was even deceiving a child. I pinched the bridge of my nose and gestured. "Why did you deliberately mistranslate my sign language to trick Emma just now?" Back then, I said I was leaving, but she told Emma that I had asked her to go back to her room and sleep. If Emma woke up the next day, saw the empty room, and realized she had been lied to, wouldn't she be upset? She said, "Mistranslate." Willow let out a soft laugh, her tone carrying an ambiguous meaning. "You don't actually think Emma can't understand sign language, do you?" Her question caught me off guard. For some reason, I recalled Emma's tense and strange reaction in the hallway. Willow shook her finger and said, "At an age when she could barely even speak clearly, she was already hugging sign language books to sleep, relying on others not understanding, using sign language to mock other kids when she had conflicts in kindergarten, and even getting her parents called in because of it. And you think she doesn't understand sign language?" I froze. So when Emma came to find me and got upset, it wasn't because of the impatient honking from the traffic jam. It was because she understood that I said I would be leaving soon, and that's why she got angry. But something still felt off, whether it was Willow's tone when she spoke, or Emma's eagerness to get close to me. Everything felt strange. Could it be that, 6 years later, The male and female leads were only maintaining appearances, their relationship already broken. After all, it was so late, and Makoto still hadn't returned. I frowned and decided to test it. I gestured. Don't worry, after all these years, I've already let it go. I won't interfere with you and Makoto. Willow pressed her lips together. Clearly stunned for a moment, she said, "What does he have to do with this?" But she quickly reacted, as if finally understanding my earlier attempts to avoid her. Her eyes widened as she said, "Don't tell me you think there's something going on between me and Makoto." Willow pulled her bag over and took out a watch from inside. She hadn't had the chance to switch back her phone card yet. That was Emma's phone watch. She said, "You said you've let it go. Fine." She pulled up a message and held it in front of me. She said, "If you really don't like me anymore, if you really don't care anymore, then why did you send me a message like this?" On the narrow screen, a familiar line of text appeared, flickering faintly under the light. My breathing stopped. No one could be more familiar with that message than me. The message I failed to send 6 years ago, in the middle of that raging fire. She had received it now. Chapter 9. Perhaps no one would ever know that Emma's birth originated from a scheme. At that time, Willow had already started her internship at the Lu Corporation, while I had joined a law firm to work in translation and certification. We were both busy with our own lives, but my mother always tried to matchmake Willow and me, perhaps afraid we would grow distant. She insisted on making soup and having me deliver it to Willow. Helpless, I accepted and followed the assistant to knock on the door of Willow's hotel room. Willow had always been cold and distant, keeping everyone at arm's length, except for me, whom she never guarded against. So neither of us ever suspected that there might be something wrong with the soup in the thermos. By the time we realized something was off, it was already too late. Willow's body grew hot, her throat dry, and she kept drinking water uncontrollably. And when I saw the flush on her face, my gaze stuck to her lips and tongue, unable to move away. The next second, she threw herself into my arms, biting her lip as she asked, "George, who gave you the soup? Did anyone touch it along the way?" I suddenly understood something, and a wave of shame and guilt washed over me. My mother had handed me the soup personally. I had not let anyone else handle it along the way. I had never imagined she would use such a method to scheme against Willow. I pushed Willow away and struggled to stand up, grabbing all the ice water from the fridge, trying to cool myself down. Then I gestured. I'll go get a doctor for you." I had drunk even more than Willow, yet I instinctively felt that in a situation like this, it would be better for us to separate. As I walked toward the door, my hands trembling while typing a message, Willow grabbed me, snatched the phone from my hand, and threw it aside, as if enduring something. She let out a soft breath and asked, "Do you really have to go?" I don't know who made the first move. I only remember that at some point, a phone call came in. Willow clung to me and wouldn't let me leave, so I ignored it, and the phone never rang again. When we regained a bit of clarity, Willow seemed to remember that I still had certification work to do that afternoon. She asked, "Did this delay you?" I shook my head and gestured. "Someone else will handle it. It's not delayed." Then I picked her up and carried her away from the damp floor-to-ceiling window into the bathroom. I looked at her, the one outside the mirror, and the one reflected inside it. Suddenly, I asked in sign language, "Who am I?" At that time, I had already learned from Makoto about the future of the so-called male and female leads. I hadn't fully believed it, because I knew I was not the kind of despicable person who would ruin someone's entire family. But I was afraid Willow wasn't in a clear state of mind now, and that she might regret it after waking up. Willow didn't answer. I let out a breath, feeling both annoyed and disappointed. But in the next moment, someone hooked their arms around my neck. Her kiss followed. Willow said, "George, I wouldn't do this with someone I don't like." When I woke up again, the room was pitch black, with faint thunder rumbling outside. At some point, it had started to rain. Half of Willow's face was hidden under the blanket. Even in her sleep, she seemed aware of the thunder she disliked. Her brows were tightly furrowed, and she slept restlessly. I pulled her into my arms, covering her ears. Only after she calmed down did I get out of bed to drink some water. There was a sound outside the door. Someone seemed to be trying to unlock the suite. I quietly moved closer and heard muffled, indistinct arguing from outside. Someone said, "How could you take the wrong room card? Idiot." Madame Song said that as long as we get photos of them in bed, the Lu family won't dare refuse. "Forget it. I'll go with you, otherwise you'll mess it up again." My mother's surname was Song. I stood frozen in place, as if plunged into an ice cellar. My fingers clenched around the glass so tightly they turned pale, and in that moment, I suddenly understood my mother's intention. Chapter 10. My mother drugged the soup to gain leverage. She wanted to create a scandal, force Willow Lu to marry me, and completely bind herself to the Lu family. Only then could she regain control and power. The effects of the drug hadn't fully worn off for Willow. I quickly grabbed my phone, sending a message to the assistant as I rushed out. Fortunately, We managed to intercept those two people in the stairwell. They said there were already a large number of reporters gathered outside the hotel. They had only snuck up early to seize the opportunity, to avoid being photographed together with Willow. I left in a hurry, but I ran straight into my mother in the underground parking garage. The moment she saw me, her expression turned cold, and she strode toward me. The next second, slap. Her hand struck my face. She snapped. "Who told you to come down here? Do you even know how much I've sacrificed for today? Do you know who I did all this for?" I didn't know, and I didn't want to know. I only wanted to protect the one person who had ever been kind to me. My head snapped to the side from the blow as she, furious, ordered the bodyguards to drag me into the elevator. I lowered my head and typed on my phone, shoving it in front of her. "It's too late, by now. Assistant Lee should already be outside with people guarding the door. There would be no more opportunities for her." She let out a bitter laugh, as if disappointed in me, and said, "Do you know Grandpa Lou has been looking for a marriage alliance for Willow lately? In terms of family background or ability, which one of them isn't better than you? If it weren't for Willow, you wouldn't stand a chance in the Wong family. This was your only opportunity. You could have become the heir of the Wong Corporation, but you're just too stupid. Don't blame me for not helping you in the future." I looked at her calmly, feeling only sorrow. I deleted the words on my notes and typed a new sentence. "You're doing this for yourself." I knew my mother had always hated me. She hated my father for his constant infidelity, hated his mistress, hated the illegitimate child he brought home, and hated me, the burden she couldn't get rid of. But she didn't dare take it out on my father. Instead, she vented all her anger on the person who should have been closest to her. Just like that year when I had a fever and knocked on her door, she said that just seeing my face made her sick, and locked me inside my bedroom. By the time the servants found me the next day, I was already unconscious from the fever. When I woke up, I could no longer speak. She felt no guilt. Instead, because I became mute and was treated as an abandoned child by the Wong family, which in turn made her even less favored by my father, she grew resentful toward me. So there was no need to talk about helping me. It was just an excuse. Seeing that I had exposed her thoughts, her hand rose high again, but the slap never came down. She forced herself to hold back her anger and had the bodyguards drag me into the car. I was locked up. My phone was confiscated. She said I needed to reflect here. I thought this farce would end there, but Willow became pregnant. Seeing the almost frenzied look in my mother's eyes, I panicked. I wanted to see Willow. I tried to escape. I even tried to steal a phone to contact the outside world, but the place was too remote, and there were too many guards. I couldn't fight them all. Every attempt ended in failure. The closest I ever got was when I managed to grab a phone and unlock it, but I couldn't send anything. Behind me came a rustling sound. The door opened. My mother stood there with several of her men, smiling as she said, "This place is equipped with dozens of signal jammers. Go ahead and take the phone, you won't be able to send anything anyway." As she spoke, she clapped her hands. Aunt Zhang walked in, holding Emma in her arms. My mother smiled and said, "It took me quite some effort to bring her here. George, take a guess, who is she?" I lunged forward like a madman, but was once again pinned to the ground by the guards, unable to move, until one night, a fire broke out. I was awakened by thick smoke drifting in through the crack of the door. I rushed to the door and kicked it with all my strength, but it didn't budge at all. Chapter 11. There was soon movement outside the door, but it didn't seem to be going smoothly. My mother cursed impatiently, then said coldly, "The key is stuck in the lock." She ordered someone to hack a gap into the door with a fire axe. The flames were already raging. I only had time to pass Emma out through that opening first. In the next second, tongues of fire licked up the door. The choking smoke was almost suffocating. Through the flames, I met her eyes through that broken opening. It took her only a second to make a decision. She abandoned everything, including me, and turned away, carrying Emma. I stood there blankly, my lips parting instinctively, confused and lost. "Mom." But no sound came out. She saw it, but her steps only paused for a brief moment before she walked away without looking back. I retreated into the bathroom. All the windows here were sealed with iron bars. I stretched my phone out beyond the bars, trying to catch a signal. Under the signal jammers, even emergency messages couldn't be sent. At that moment, I thought of the future Makoto had once shown me, and I realized, absurdly, that even if fate deviates at times, it ultimately returns to its original path. This time, I might really die. I gave up on futile attempts to call for help. In the final moments of my life, I opened Willow's chat window and typed a long message. I started from the day I left, writing that my sudden disappearance hadn't been intentional. I wrote about how moved I was when I learned she had secretly learned sign language for me, and shamelessly, I wrote that I liked her, again and again. I copied and tried to send the message, praying that the signal jammers would be destroyed by the fire first, hoping for a different result amid countless failed attempts. But my persistence received no answer from fate. I knew that even without me, Willow's future would still be bright and beautiful. Before I lost consciousness, I had only one thought. What a pity. Just like back then, when I curled up in a corner, deleting and rewriting, leaving one final line at the end of the message. What a pity. It seems I can only walk with you this far. Chapter 12. But that message, delayed by 6 years, was ultimately sent successfully. While searching for a signal in the fire, my phone had accidentally fallen to the ground. I thought it had been damaged, but it stubbornly followed me 6 years into the future, and before it completely died, it managed to connect to a signal and sent that message without me even knowing. But that didn't change anything, because I had missed an entire 6 years. In this timeline, the male and female leads were already together. I suppressed the bitterness in my eyes and refuted what Willow had said earlier. Don't tell me you think there's something going on between me and him. Keeping my expression as neutral as possible, I gestured. I saw your collaboration advertisement. It's good. You two match well. I wish you both happiness. Then I gestured again. And you said you wouldn't do that kind of thing with someone you don't like. I actually believed you. Doesn't that just make me a complete clown? I gestured rapidly, saying whatever came to mind, my words completely lacking logic. Perhaps because my attack had no real impact. Willow ended up laughing instead. She took out a household registration booklet from the drawer and pointed to a certain line on a certain page, saying unhurriedly, "George, what does this word say?" I focused my gaze. There it was, bold and clear, unmarried. I fell silent, completely speechless. Only then did I belatedly recall everything I had just done. I really had made myself look like a clown. Seeing her tilt her head and raise her eyes as if she was about to say something, I quickly grabbed her mouth. Stop. She was definitely about to make fun of me again. She had always been like this. Sure enough, Willow rolled her eyes. Knowing I didn't want to hear it, she took out her phone, typed something, and pushed it in front of me. On the screen, it read, "Can you not leave? Emma has always hoped that one day you would take her to school. She misses you a lot." Willow had always said the opposite of what she meant. Just like that day when it thundered, she was clearly the one who was scared. Yet she insisted on saying it was me who was afraid. After all these years of knowing Willow, I had become quite good at translating Willow language. What she was really saying to me was, "Can you not leave? I really miss you." I was still looking at the words she had typed when she suddenly stood on tiptoe and covered my ears, saying something softly. So I said, "All right, since you miss me that much, I'll stay for one night." Chapter 13. The next day, I took Emma to school. When she saw me after waking up, she was overjoyed and threw herself into my arms, her eyes sparkling as she said, "Mommy really didn't lie to me." Only then did I realize that Willow had promised Emma, if she went to sleep obediently, she would still be able to see me the next day. No wonder. Even though she was reluctant, she still listened and went with Willow. I returned to the same law firm as before. Before stepping in, I had prepared myself countless times. After all, I had disappeared for so many years, the firm had probably already fired me. But when David saw me, his eyes lit up. He said in surprise, "Man, you're finally back." David said that back then, my sudden disappearance had indeed made him very angry. But one day, Willow suddenly came to see him. After learning the truth, he let it go. In fact, I had originally been specially recruited into the firm by David. Compared to others, I could only communicate with deaf clients using sign language, so my usefulness was quite limited. I had relied on sheer persistence to translate the most difficult foreign language documents that others in the firm didn't want to deal with. There were many technical terms. During that time, I stayed up almost every night until dawn. On the day I was officially hired, no one in the firm objected. David glanced at his watch and said, "Perfect timing. There's a deaf client in the hospital today. Come with me." I handed over the relevant case files to David. The client had a low level of education and could barely write. Communication relied entirely on sign language. After the car accident, even defending his rights had become extremely difficult. Just as I was about to leave the hospital, I suddenly stopped. From afar, my eyes met my mother's. She was wearing a hospital gown. When she saw me, she froze for a moment, then calmly dismissed the caregiver. "It's good, you're still alive." We stood there in silence for a while before she spoke again. "Actually, I went back that year. Don't resent me. The smoke was too thick. I could only take the child and leave first. By the time I wanted to go back for you, it was already too late." I typed a few words on my phone. "It doesn't matter. None of it matters anymore." Time had left deep traces on her face. Her eyelashes trembled slightly. She took a deep breath and suddenly asked, "You've always been like this, only caring about the people you like, ignoring everyone else. George, when you say it doesn't matter anymore, does that mean I'm an outsider to you now too?" I didn't refute her. She continued, "Emma actually resembles you quite a bit. Every time I see her, I'm reminded of what you were like as a child." I cut her off coldly. "You have no right to mention her. I had been abandoned twice in my life. Once when I was 8 years old, When I had a fever, my mother locked me alone in a room. The second time was when the fire broke out. She took the child for the ransom and never looked back. I was someone who could be discarded at will. Someone who didn't matter, like the weeds growing by the roadside. But Emma was not. She would grow up in a loving family. Every word she spoke would be heard. She was not me. She would not be abandoned like I was. She would not lose her voice for years like I did, yet my mother couldn't even understand a single sign. Perhaps understanding what I meant, her voice quieted. With a self-mocking tone, she said, "You were right that day. I did it all for myself, for my own benefit. Willing to use anything, family, friendship, everything. The doctor said it was caused by overwork. Maybe this is my punishment." My gaze fell on the hospital wristband on her arm. Late stage. I lowered my head and typed, "Mrs. Song, if there's nothing else, I'll be leaving now." But she smiled faintly and said, "I'm happy for you." She lifted her eyes, her gaze drifting somewhere behind me. She said, "Your life is better than mine, George. I hope your future is nothing but smooth roads." I followed her gaze and turned around. I saw Willow, slightly out of breath, standing not far away in the bustling crowd. The moment she saw me, she ran toward me. Before I could react, she threw herself into my arms and held me tightly. Chapter 14. At some point, my mother had already left. Willow said, "It's okay, I'm here." I sniffed, holding back the sting in my nose, and gently patted her back. Then I asked, "Did you come to pick Emma up from school with me?" Willow paused, but instead of answering directly, she said, "Makoto filmed that Lu Corporation advertisement because..." I interrupted her with a gesture. "I know. Actually, Makoto had already called me earlier that day. He was now a household name Best Actor. He told me that I should have died in that fire 6 years ago. It was because Willow paid a certain price to break free from the system that I was able to appear here. As for filming the advertisement, it was because he had helped Willow with something back then, and that was the compensation he asked for." At the end, he lowered his voice and asked me, "George, can I hang up now? I've got a date. I've already kept my girlfriend waiting too long." "So what was the price?" I didn't know. Instead, rather inappropriately, my thoughts drifted back to last night, when Willow covered my ears and said something to me. After I lost my voice, I had countless times tried to speak in front of a mirror. What she didn't know was that I could actually read lips. When the world fell into silence, I saw her pause for a moment and say to me, "I love you." I had once spoken, only to receive no response from my parents. After being constantly ignored, all that remained of me was caution and restraint. So even the smallest kindness became something I treasured deeply. I tried desperately to smooth out every edge of myself, thinking that would make others accept me, until one day, I met Willow. She looked cold and distant, yet she reached out her hand to me when I fell, seriously helping me up when I was bruised all over. I thought our meeting would be brief, but she stubbornly stayed by my side, and told me, "George, you don't need to please anyone." Suddenly, I asked, "Can I still make a request now?" She said, "Of course." I gestured. "How about going to the Civil Affairs Bureau with me to sign a long-term contract?" She couldn't help but laugh. Then she said, "Sure, but long-term isn't enough. It has to be for a lifetime." Looking at the curve of her smiling eyes, I was reminded of that summer night when Willow stayed with me on the rooftop, feeding mosquitoes. Back then, as I watched the Wong family's car drive away, I couldn't help but ask, "Are we friends now?" And I remembered her tilting her head, blinking at me, and saying with a soft laugh, "Now we're accomplices." Willow Extra. Chapter 1. Emma was only 4 years old the year she was scammed. After school, she secretly slipped out, thinking no one noticed, when in fact, a bodyguard had been following her the whole way. She stood alone on the bridge for 2 hours. By the time Willow arrived, the back of her hands were covered in mosquito bites. The moment she saw Willow, the little girl, who had been pretending not to care, instantly had red-rimmed eyes and reached out her small arms to hug her mother. Only then did she allow herself to feel wronged. Choking back sobs, she handed her phone watch to Willow and asked in a muffled voice, "Mom, why didn't Dad come?" The device recorded everything: how Emma had answered a scam call, how she was tricked into adding a contact, transferring money, and then being blocked. She had been deceived from the very beginning. Willow knew that. But if she hadn't been allowed to come, Emma would never have let it go. Willow knew that too. Lowering her gaze, Willow gently touched her daughter's slightly cold cheeks. Chilled by the wind, Willow said, "He was pretending." Emma frowned, pushing her hand away, and seriously argued, "It was real." So Willow patiently asked, "Did he say his name? You only got that phone watch last month. How did he know your number? And did you forget, when Daddy was little, he got sick and can't speak, so he only sends messages to you. He wouldn't call you." Emma stared at the ground, finally seeming to realize something. She fell silent, her mood low. Children are easy to fool. All it took was one question, "Are you my dad?" and the other party went along with it, changing their approach to continue the scam. After returning home, Emma remained quiet and downcast. During dinner, she suddenly asked Willow, "Mom, can you teach me how to read? If someone sends me a message next time, I'll ask for their name first and have them write it out." That night, Willow taught her how to read and write. Her small hand gripped the pen tightly, tracing each stroke carefully as she asked, "George Wong, what does this mean?" Willow answered, "It means a full name, surname and given name." Emma stared at the characters for a while, then frowned and said innocently, "It's so hard to write. Can't I just write Wong?" Willow asked in return, "If someone calls you Wong, would you know they're calling you?" Emma thought hard for a moment. It seemed she wouldn't. Willow said, "You can only find him if you remember his full name." Emma nodded and remembered it. After carefully tracing several pages, she seemed to think of something and casually asked, "Then, does Dad have your phone number? So when he sends messages, does he only send them to you?" Willow didn't realize the little schemes in the child's mind at that moment. She simply thought Emma had learned her lesson and wouldn't be fooled again. So she gave a soft And so, at that time, she had no idea that over the next 2 years, her phone SIM card would be secretly swapped out again and again. Chapter 2, Willow Extra. That night, a heavy storm broke out. Thunder crashed through the deep night. She sat by the floor-to-ceiling window, still unable to sleep. When she was young, she had been kidnapped and witnessed her parents' deaths with her own eyes. Very few people knew that the day she was kidnapped happened to be a stormy night just like this. Every time it rained and thundered, George would come to find her. But now, George was gone. As a child, she feared thunder. Later, she grew to resent it. Now, all she felt was silence. Why was it so quiet? She stared at the curtain of rain outside, feeling the emotions she had long buried break through like a dam collapsing in the storm. She missed him, so much that it ached. After a moment, she got up, put on her shoes at the entrance, and, on the kind of stormy night she hated most, went alone to the cemetery. She stood in the rain, quietly looking at the gravestone for a while. Then she threw away her umbrella. Under the stunned gaze of the caretaker, she dug open the grave with her bare hands, tears mixing with the rain. She was going to take George away. It had taken her many years to help George break the habit of bottling everything up inside. She knew about Wong father's opportunism. She knew about Wong mother's manipulation. She knew how desperately George had tried to escape. She knew he would never want to remain in this cold grave, built by the Wong family, filled with nothing but false affection. In the raging storm, she carefully lifted the urn, but the moment she held it, her tears abruptly stopped. The weight was wrong. At that instant, her heart began to pound violently. She shielded it carefully with her umbrella and opened it. Empty. The world fell silent, only the sound of her heartbeat remained. She stood there, stunned for a moment. Then, suddenly, she let out a soft laugh. George wasn't dead. That night, as she dug up the grave, she laughed out loud in the raging storm. Chapter 3, Willow Extra. That night, she had a dream. She dreamed of another world. In that world, she also dug up his grave on this very night, but unlike her, that version of her wasn't so fortunate. The urn was not empty. The conquest mission in that world was just as unsuccessful, until one day, Makoto found a way to evade the system's surveillance and came to her. Makoto spoke casually, saying that the so-called mission might just be a scam. He realized that George was completely different from how he appeared in the storyline he had, including that sudden fire, which was very likely the system's doing. The system used its energy to rewrite the original world, issuing missions for the players to follow the script and conquer the female lead. They had all been deceived. Willow listened quietly as he spoke, hearing his excitement as he said he could help her, but Willow only asked one question. She said, "You still haven't given up, have you?" Half-truths mixed with lies, trying to get close to her and continue the mission. "You're still planning not to give up, aren't you?" Exposed. Makoto shrugged, somewhat regretful as he said, "All right, now I really have given up." But with Makoto's help, she still obtained a chance to negotiate with the system. The system had long grown tired of this world that couldn't be conquered. All it wanted now was to end things quickly and reclaim the energy it had used to rewrite everything. So, for the first time, it relented and agreed to Willow's condition, to send him from that fire, to 6 years in the future. Willow asked, "How do I know you won't interfere with that world afterward?" The system fell silent for a moment. Then, in front of Willow, deleted all its anchors. If there could be a world where happiness existed, then that would be enough. After that day, the system demanded that Willow continue cooperating to complete the mission. Willow ignored it. Faced with the system's hysterical questioning, she only found it foolish. Willow even laughed softly and said, "When a liar deceives another liar, isn't that perfectly normal?" By then, many years had passed, so many that Emma had already grown up. One day, Willow asked her, I'm going to find your father. Will you be okay on your own? Emma was silent for a moment, then gently placed the urn into her arms. She said, "Go ahead, Mom." At last, she fulfilled what she had wanted to do on that night more than 10 years ago, when she first dug up the grave. Their time had stopped just before they could say their love aloud. She carried his urn and slowly scattered his ashes into the vast, untamed sea. Then, she leapt. So this was the end. But at that moment, she suddenly remembered the day they first met. Many years ago, the world had been noisy and restless, some people fearful, others flattering. They had simply met each other's gaze by chance. Across the distance, back then, George had given her a gentle, quiet smile. He saw through all her clumsy disguises. Though he wasn't afraid of thunder at all, he still came to find her on every stormy night afterward. Every time, he was the one who came first. When she opened the door, she would see him standing there, frowning seriously, holding up a handwritten note that read, "It's thundering again, so tonight, I'll reluctantly keep you company again. Miss."